Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work on the road, not my usual locale. And I'm here with Chris. And folks know that we love talking with founders who we have the pleasure to serve. So Chris started a company called Laskie that's in the recruiting space, and I'll let him tell you more about it. Experienced founder. And Chris, the question we want to get at today, people love these questions about career change because it's such a moment where if you think about it deeply, you can get a lot of value. So the question today is, I've got this job that I really want, but I don't have the experience or qualifications or something that either I or they believe are necessary to the job. So what do I do? And thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good to be here. Yeah, happy to chat about my own experiences if that's helpful.
Oh,
yeah. So I think, so I guess for context, I have done three kind of parts of my career. I started off in sales and then I moved into operations. And then my last company before Laskie, I was leading product and engineering teams. So I've sort of seen like all aspects of like a traditional tech company, I guess. And I think in my experience, what worked really well 12 years ago when I was breaking into a company, I actually really wanted to do operations, I thought, but I also didn't know what that meant. And it was super vague because operations at one company is quite different than ops at another. And so
What
I
does not
think
fit into other people's job descriptions, but is necessary to make the business work.
Exactly. Anything and everything. And
Yeah.
so my path was I just started in sales, and I think that that's a great path for so many people. Like if you think you want to do product management, or you think you want to do ops, or you think you want to do account management, I think it was true 12 years ago, it was true 5 years ago, it's definitely true today. Break into something where the hiring team or the hiring manager has just a much lower tolerance for experience. And if you do that at a really fast growing company, the number of opportunities that will come up for you to branch into the area that you want to be in are basically infinite. And so starting with sales, starting with customer support, I think really what you're doing is trying to build trust. And what I was trying to do in my career was just build trust with the hiring manager and with the CEO at this fast growing company and say, hey, if I can nail it in sales, I'm sure that I can figure out product management ops, like one of these much more sexy, but also vague titles.
And how about first jobs? Because the reason I ask is, so as I think you know, I've also had phases in my career. I mean, I've worked in government, nonprofit, academia, big corporations, started a company, now VC. I've never felt fully qualified for any job I've ever had. And my mentality on it was always, and I think you're describing a really refined example of this. My mentality was always look for a place where they're willing to take the risk of hiring you, meaning like where the person, like zero people ever say like, I know that candidate doesn't have the experience, but golly gee, I really think they can do the job. It just doesn't happen. And here we are, by the way, two guys with a lot of privilege, like two white men talking to each other. Can't even imagine how much harder it is for others. And your point is, I always thought, therefore, go in wherever you can and prove yourself. And your point, which I do think is really powerful, is if you do that in a company where there's a lot of growth, then they're going to have a lot of need. And trust internally is enough to be able to move around. What about people who are looking to break in and don't have a natural entry point of any kind? Should they just take like the entry level sales job that is available to anybody? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think that's a great place to start. If it is your first job, my advice is always skip the recruiter level or layer and the HR layer and try to go direct to the hiring manager, but then really prove it to the hiring manager. So a good example of that is recruiters are there to pattern match largely. Like there's also very little upside to a recruiter for taking an early career risk on somebody, but to a hiring manager, there's massive upside because that person they could get for maybe less money in their budget. But if that works out well, then they look amazing. Their team looks amazing. Like the hiring manager really reaps a lot of the rewards from taking those bets. So I think that the most tactical way that I would start and the way that I did it 12 years ago when I was applying to startups was email the CEO of a small company that maybe has raised a couple rounds, like they've raised a pre-seed and a seed and they're heading to an A, or they've done, I mean, you could mix and match this for whatever size company you're looking for. But when I did it, the company was 15 people. I emailed the CEO directly. And I really tried to prove to him, hey, I studied pre-law in college. I've never done sales in my life. And I'm just trying to break into this company because I love the space. I loved what the company was doing. And it's ultimately, if that cold email goes really well, then boom, you're qualified for sales. If that cold email, yeah.
I think that that is a great point in that sense that you are doing the job. So you might as well demonstrate it in the application process. And I often think people who assert some quality in the application process that they don't themselves demonstrate, like, well, I have initiative and I'm a go-getter, but I applied through your website. It's like me. In our case, by the way, we're hiring for a role now, and we are pushing people who reach out to us to apply through the website because we want to support the official process for fairness purposes. And then the other thing that I think is implicit in what you're saying is the value of homework, which is to say, a lot of people come to me now and they're like, hey, you are an investor in Masterclass. Can you introduce me to the team? Well, it's like, yeah, but everybody and their mother wants a job at Masterclass now. And so, but if you do the homework and you identify some company when it is only 15 people and you write that email, they're both can be post product market fit, fast growing companies. But in one, you've shown you've done the work by identifying something less seen, even though all the data is out there in public and findable. And the other is you've demonstrated to them that you care about them by investing time. And people tend to be reciprocal about that. Like, oh, you invested a lot of time in us. At least let me give you the benefit of the doubt. And you're so right about recruiters who, generally speaking, don't have, some do, but many don't have the context to be able to say, what a great cold email. And so let me ask you, Laskie is a recruiting company. Maybe now that you are doing this role, you could describe for you what you do, but also how you overcome that to help find those, matches with upside.
Yep. So Laskie is laskie.com, Laskie.com. And we help companies hire engineers, DevOps, product managers, and salespeople for half the cost of a traditional recruiter. So we're basically a two-sided marketplace with a lot of people in the middle who are helping to deeply screen and sort of work on behalf of candidates. So we take a pretty strong stance at Laskie of being aggressively candidate friendly, even if we can't help you find a job in our marketplace. We do all sorts of crazy things to help you get a great job somewhere else. And so really trying to build this like reputation of helping candidates wherever possible. And so I think, that point about, recruiters not seeing the great cold email or not resonating with them is definitely true. And I think it's totally fine what you mentioned. Like a lot of recruiters are going to push candidates into a more traditional application process. Whereas if the VP of sales, the VP of product, the VP of ops, somebody that you want to work for at that company, they're probably getting a ton of in-mails and a ton of emails, but very few of those are actually good. Like, when's the last time you've gotten a great cold email? It doesn't happen all that often. And I think, another thing that we recommend for candidates if they don't get a job through Laskie is actually to go through, if you do want to work at a venture-backed company, go through the VCs, especially some of the earlier career angels. Like every VC, yourself included, is always looking to add as much value as possible to their portfolio. So the Masterclass one is like an example of, you have to intuit that is a well-known established brand at this point.
It's not that valuable for me to send them random candidates.
Exactly. But you have like so many early stage companies where they have, 2 employees, 5 employees, 15. The amount of founders that want that intro, and if your intro or your cold email isn't standing out to the founder at first, email Roy. Go find out who the investors in that company are. And I've actually found a lot of success in, picking one of the earlier career angels because they're not getting a ton of cold emails from random candidates who want to work at their portfolio companies. And so I think that there are great investors who, are always happy to kind of be those connectors. But what I've found, I think in my own network is if, because I only have so many angel investments, if a candidate, emails me and says, hey, I want to work at this 5-person, 10-person, 50-person company that you angeled in, that looks great. It's an easy layup for me if they end up being a good candidate. And so I'm happy to make that intro. And then the CEO is a lot more willing, I think, to take a meeting based on my recommendation and some random, first year, just out of school, college kid who wants to, meet with them.
And so in the case of Laskie, are you able to train the team you work with to see that potential in candidates when they come in? I mean, what allows you to offer candidates at much lower cost?
Yeah, so we try to do this. So we take a look at every candidate who comes in manually with at least 2 sets of actual like human reviewed eyes, and we certainly don't get it perfect. In fact, I was just explaining to a more junior candidate with only 4 months of experience why we didn't pick him for a specific role, or why we weren't able to matchmake him. So we try to give really detailed feedback on that, but. I think ultimately a lot of it comes down to we only have so much data from public sources. So we do a lot of, for engineers, we're pulling stuff from GitHub, we're pulling stuff from LinkedIn. The best engineers in many cases have the worst LinkedIn profiles, so that's really hard to go off of. But I think for technical roles, I think admittedly it is a little bit easier. If you've worked with a certain stack or library or framework for a number of years, you're clearly in high demand. And then I think our value add is a little bit different. Our value add at Laskie for more senior talent is you fill out one application and we're going to custom curate 3 or 6 or 8 interviews with these great companies that we've already done the vetting work to make sure that the team has a reasonable interview process. The team pays really well. They're going to offer, significant equity. So we're doing curation and vetting, I think, on both sides of that marketplace. For junior talent, it really does come down to, I think you do have to jump through more hoops to stand out. So one of the reasons that we have this sort of manual process is that somebody from our team gets on the phone with you for 30 minutes and you can tell your story. You can have hopefully a great sales call or talk about all the marketing stuff you did in high school or college that would translate really well to X company.
One thing I hear I was just saying, I hear you saying that one way you do it is instead of putting it on the candidate to figure out the mechanism for standing out, you're giving them multiple ways to stand out. Their GitHub open source contributions, the way they show up in a half-hour meeting. For me, at one transition point in my career, it was my willingness to take a 50% pay cut, and I wasn't making much money, and it was the right job. And so weirdly, 50% of not much money was like, well, I could still make rent. And so that was fine. And then another time I said, I will join you, and you don't have to give me a title. If you can't figure out where to level me, just have me be human here. And that worked out. I mean, that ended up being a wonderful experience at News Corp. But I really appreciate that you are proactively recognizing that different candidates show up in different ways. And like you said, lots of the best engineers have the worst LinkedIn profiles and are actually actively allergic to LinkedIn. And so maybe one day their Laskie profile will be a thing. All right. Any parting thoughts before we wrap?
No, I mean, I think the title thing is another great differentiator, and that's another web where I think it's easy to get caught up in recruiting. Recruiting likes that,
Yes.
clean lines, clean titles, and so that's just, I think, another anecdote of why I'm sure in that case, direct to some, person that ended up becoming your manager or, person on your team is probably the right strategy.
Awesome.
I think that there's a lot of ways to stand out, and you may think that all these other candidates are standing out. In my experience, almost 10 years in recruiting now, not that many candidates are doing unique things to stand out. And so I would just encourage you to do anything is better than just like clicking the LinkedIn apply button.
100%.
Because that's what 99%.
The bar for a little bit of work is actually pretty low. And some candidates are amazing at this, but you do a little bit of work over and over and over again, you really will stand out. All right. Well, that's what we got for today. And then, for folks who are here for the first time, the reason we say it's not advice is we're not telling you what to do with your life. We're just sharing our experiences. You can find past episodes and write-ups of some of the more popular ones at thisisnotadvice.work. You'll be able to find this one there once we post it. And Chris, here's to many more to be continued.